Call the council meeting to order. Motion to accept or amend the agenda. Brian and Biden. All in favor? Carried. Declaration of pecuniary conflict of interest, if any? None noted. For the Reeves report, there's a number of things that are moving forward, especially we're getting closer and closer to homecoming. There's a beautiful display of different green, white, and purple decorations over at the store right close to Connie's office for those that are looking for them, and the colors blend really well together. So I would say thanks to the decorating committee that have pulled that together. Moving forward, reading of the minutes of the previous meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Carried. Deputations. Gary, do you want to introduce Jennifer?
Okay, thank you, Reeve. We have Jennifer Croft, Cheryl Phillips. Jennifer is the manager of community programs for One Care Home and Community Support Services. Please, sir.
Thank you, Council, for allowing us to come speak. We're here from One Care Home and Community Support Services, which is a not-for-profit local charitable organization, and we provide home care and community programs to older adults, frail seniors, and those with disabilities. Our services are provided throughout Huron County and in Stratford and Perth County, and last year we assisted 5,000 people. We offer a broad range of services to help local residents maintain their health and well-being and to live independently in their own homes and communities. Our programs include Meals on Wheels, Easy Ride Transportation, Home Care, and a number of programs in exercise and wellness. We are funded by the Southwest LHIN to provide dollars to cover our base costs, but we also rely on donations, fundraising, and fees for some of our programs to ensure that the services are affordable and low cost. We also count on volunteer support to deliver our programs. We have over 1,000 volunteers, and their contribution is crucial when you take into consideration that they delivered 46,000 Meals on Wheels, for example, or assisted more than 1,100 people who took part in exercise and wellness programs in communities across the area. We're here tonight to ask you to consider the reduction of rental fees for the North Huron West Cast Community Complex that we offer free for seniors exercise classes in the area. Under the direction of the Southwest LHIN, we've been mandated to provide exercise and falls prevention education classes to reduce the risk of falls among seniors in the communities across Huron County. Our program funding is contingent upon running each class 120 minutes per week, and that should occur across 2 or 3 times of the week for 48 weeks of the year. Our classes must be offered free to participants. Under previous funding models, we were allowed to recoup a portion of our costs through client fees, but the new falls prevention programs are expected to be free to allow access to a wide variety of clients. In Wingham, we're currently offering 4 hours of classes per week, 2 days per week. Our classes are offered at both moderate and high-level instruction to meet the needs of participants at various skill levels. And we have over 20 participants registered for these classes and have targets to grow the program over 2014. We also offer one Pilates class twice a week, half an hour each time, that fall under the previous program model where we're able to charge client fees. And we try to keep the client fees for this program affordable at $1.50 per class to cover the paid instructors because it's a specialized instructor for those classes. The funding for our falls prevention programs is minimal, and it's intended to cover the cost of volunteer instructor recruitment and training, equipment purchases and maintenance, marketing and promotion, and oversight by a regulated health professional. We have been able to assign 30% of our budget to cover rental fees for facilities. Under the current rental rates that we're paying for North Huron at $16.14 per hour or $18.24 with HST, our classes cost us $81 per week or $4,000 per year with HST included to operate. which accounts for almost 40% of our available budget. Our target for hourly rental rates is $13 per hour plus HST, which is what we're asking you to consider. We did bring a handout that also has some feedback from some of our participants that we'd be happy to share with you as well. And Cheryl is actually very closely involved with the participants and can give a bit of feedback from them as well.
Yeah, so I'm the wellness coordinator. I'm kind of on the ground person coordinating both the instructors and the actual programs at all the sites in Huron County. So I was the coordinator here in Wingham 8 years ago when we started up this program. And we're very happy to report that we actually have the same volunteer instructor who started out with us 8 years ago, was teaching 2 hours a week for us, and is now up to 5 volunteer hours a week from September to June volunteering for us. So very well respected and well trained individual volunteer in the community. Each year throughout our programs, we take the participants and we offer 4 different fitness assessments, and then we come back 6 months later and we can track their improvement, whether they've remained the same or whether we've declined. So from last fall's testing, we recently redid it a couple weeks ago, and 82% of the Wingham participants at Westcast had improved their function since last fall after 6 months of attending the program. Other than the Westcast program, we also offer classes out at Turnberry Estates and just recently started up at St. Helens. So we are expanding to other sites.
Thank you.
Questions?
Hi, thanks ladies for coming. I know we've been working at trying to get you into council for a few weeks now. We've been offering the program at North Huron Westcast Community Complex for some time, and we've been chatting a little bit about offering it in Blythe, and maybe you can expand on your hopes to do that while we're here tonight, whether that comes to fruition or not, so that we don't have to revisit that again. Can we maybe talk about what your thoughts are on doing it?
Yes, I did go to various sites in Blythe. The arena obviously is an ideal site. It's got a nice floor and it's very accessible and central. The rent actually was much, much higher than the Westcast complex. I kind of thought that facilities within the same jurisdiction would kind of have the same hourly rate. So it really was way out of our realm of even considering. So we have currently started up at one of the churches. Its capacity is going to limit the program, so I do expect that by fall we will be needing a bigger facility as well. So should we be able to afford the arena at that point? I know there were a couple of other possibilities in Blythe as well, but I haven't heard confirmation of rental from them either. We're rent-free at the church, so that's really nice, but it's not quite big enough for us.
I just wanted to comment back, if I may. I know my report is later on in your package. I guess I just wanted council to be aware that the rate for the hourly rate for the hall is much more than for the meeting space at the North Huron Westcast Community Complex. It has a much larger capacity, and so we have a rate to rent that. So you could consider offering it at a lower rate for their program if they wanted to use that space if they do grow out of this church. So we can discuss that later, but that's what I've kind of alluded to in my report. But that's for council's consideration.
When I heard about this program, I was wondering why you would offer another program. There are already 2 exercise programs in Blythe. Are you competing with them?
So our targets for our locations are actually set by the LIN, and so what they're really trying to look at, I'm not sure if the programs in Blythe are actually free, but these ones are specifically targeted towards falls prevention. So they actually include exercises that are specifically meant to reduce falls amongst seniors with an education component as well. So the LIN actually has provided the target communities that we're then required to work with and attempt to set up the classes within.
The Tai Chi program covers those things too, balance and
yeah, so we attempt as much as we can to work with existing programs, so we're not competing, but at the same time we have certain requirements that the LIN has given us, so they have to follow what's called the Seniors Fitness Instructors course with respect to the curriculum that we provide from exercises. So Tai Chi wouldn't be one that we could link with readily and easily because it doesn't fit with the requirements that the LIN has given us for mandates for these programs.
I just feel not right about subsidizing a program that's going to compete with an existing program that's been going on for, I don't know, 12, 14 years. And
So now the other program in Blythe is one that we have actually taken over because that instructor was wanting to give it away. So it had previously been one of One Care several years ago. So that was the one at the Christian Reformed Church.
Right.
But there's about
I've
12 to
talked about
14
that.
people. So that actually, she wishes to retire, but she wants the classes to continue. So it was opportune time to be negotiating with her. So
well, that's fortunate.
yeah, she is, I think, going to teach until the end of May. We're in there once a week now, and then we will be twice a week. But I think she will stay on as a guest instructor occasionally in her retirement too. So yes, that's our preference as well, is to not, move into a community where there already is something and compete with that. We would rather work with what is there and enhance it. So I know that Tai Chi in all the areas they have a different funding model. So I don't know whether that would be doable under the ministry's guidelines or not, because they kind of run their own organization
All right.
for funding like that. We have tried in the past to
Blythe
offer
Group is
Tai Chi.
independent. Blythe Group is independent. They're not part of
The
chain.
bigger London
But,
group, yeah.
But they pay their own way.
And some of the Tai Chi people do come up to our program as well. So it's a great enhancement. I don't think it's an either or. I think the more the better. And if there's more opportunities in Blythe, people can go 3 times a week. That's even better.
Thank you very much.
Through the read, what's the average class size of when you're running in, when what you expect in class?
So our ultimate target from the LIN is meant to be 35 unique individuals. So they don't necessarily have to attend every class, but we're targeting to reach 35 people through the class. So at this point in time, I believe our one class is actually running fairly high. It's the higher level, is at actually 20 participants. Our lower level class is sort of struggling a bit more because it's a newer class. And so that one will require a bit more promotion, but aiming to get it to similar levels as well.
We just started it up as of April 1st. Right now we have 3 participants in there. The first class has been the one that has been going for 8 years, and then we've just enhanced it to become the falls prevention class. We now have about 20 regular participants, with a few more than that registered, but on an average day there's about 20 participants. And we have gotten several new ones with the addition of the free. That was as of January 1st, where we no longer charge program fees. We weren't charging really exorbitant fees prior. We didn't really know whether that was a barrier, but free obviously is attractive. So we've had some new participants since January.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much for that presentation, and when we come to the report, we'll make some decisions.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Business arising from previous meetings, Sally McMillan, and there's some points on the report on the money developments. Sally?
Yeah, I'm just going to, so I do have these maps coming up on the screen hopefully, but I just wanted to provide sort of a bigger view of the draft plan. So this is the actual application essentially right here. This is draft plan for the Wingham Creek Inc. subdivision and the phasing plan on how it would progress and unfold. And then I'll just grab this. So, and this is, I'll just put this up here. This is the aerial photography with the draft plan put over top of it. So it gives you an idea, a little better idea of the natural environment area too. that hopefully everyone in the room can see what we're talking about. All right, so we're here to review my recommendation and some of the details coming out of revisions to the application for draft plan approval on a subdivision at the east side of Wingham. And it is known as Wingham Creek. So really this is a sort of a culmination of about a year and a half's worth of review and working back and forth with the developer and incorporating comments from engineering and from the public meeting and consultations with agencies. An example would be Maitland Valley Conservation Authority. So we start out with a number of studies that get reviewed by staff and by the agencies. There was about 7 of them that help us to evaluate the area of the subject land that's suitable for development. So you get to that point, and then there are about 5 studies that you use once you have your developable area to lay it out and design it and figure out what's needed and how you can address those needs in the subdivision. So that's what we're talking about with respect to materials that have been reviewed over this time since the application was made in December of 2012. So Huron County is the approval authority on plans of subdivision, and they'll be Committee of the Whole of Huron County Council will be reviewing this application in June. That's what we're aiming for. And so tonight I'm here to provide you with an update and 2 recommendations in support of the draft plan of subdivision. And one of them is to support the proposed plan subdivision, and one of them is to support the draft conditions that I've attached to my recommendation. So just to review, the application currently brings us 250 residential units over about 11.5 hectares of the total land base of the subject property, which is 36 hectares. And an additional 8.5 of future residential blocks, and we'll discuss those a little bit more. So in addition to those residential blocks, we have stormwater management blocks, 2 parkland blocks, and I'll point them out maybe with my arrow. I can get it up. So we have a park located here and a park located here. And then the third, there's a third component to parkland being dedicated to the township inevitably, and that is a trail linking with the existing trail in Wingham. And it essentially follows along here, I think along here, the stormwater management pond. It juts out onto the street just here, and then follows a hedgerow completely down the east side of the property. So it is creating a loop essentially around the perimeter of the property, which is in direct response to several letters and people's comments at the public meeting. So that has been achieved through some of the working back and forth, is the trail system in a naturalized setting in a loop around the perimeter. Further to that, we have natural environment, about 4.5 hectares at the north end of the property along the river valley. So that's area that has been determined that isn't suitable for development, and it includes a 10-meter buffer at the back of those lots along there. So the buffer is included in the area that is not going to be developed. So it's north of the lots that are indicated on the draft plan. And then the balance of the lands will become the roads and servicing areas. So registration of the subdivision is proposed in 3 phases. And the first phase contains largely a mix of single detached, semi-detached, and multiple attached housing on a stormwater management pond and a park. We talked about the parkland and how it's distributed. With respect to roads, the basic plan is to extend Highland Drive, John Street, and Charles Street coming into the subdivision, and then they would connect with the commercial lands to the south of the property, and then connect with Highway 86 at some point in the future. And in addition to that, there's 9 internal streets that would be new and would have new names, etc. for the residential blocks. So there, as I said, there's a mix of housing throughout the subdivision plan. Primarily in phase 1, we have the single detached, semi-detached, and multiple attached. And within the single detached opportunities are various frontages, which leads us to various lot sizes, basically. And that is coming from a trend in demand in the area and throughout Ontario for smaller lots. And that is sort of in line with, or piggybacking on the trend that an aging population has a preference towards individual ownership, but yet not the cost outlay and the maintenance required for larger lots. So there was a residential market study done by the applicant that talked about growth rate, but also the lot types. And we did seek a peer review of that market study, so in a sense a second opinion on whether this subdivision was really proposing the right mix and size and lot fabric that was going to meet the needs of the community. So that company was called Altus, and they did a review of recent subdivision and condominium residential developments within 50 kilometers of Wingham. And coming from that, the gist of what we learned from that was support for this lot fabric, and also support for the major change from the original application, which is the open residential blocks. And I'm going to point them out to you with my arrow again. So they are in here, this area here, this L-shaped piece, this square here, a rectangle here, and various chunks down at the bottom in phase 3. So the objective of the open blocks is to provide flexibility in future years. So both the market research and the peer review of the research indicate that there is less demand currently for higher density housing options such as apartment buildings. And so what this does is it allows us to accommodate apartment buildings or accommodate condominium developments that could take the form of bungalows, attached bungalows, or what have you, but they don't necessarily all face the street or have frontage on a street. So these open blocks allow for different forms of housing development in the future and help us to feel more comfortable about the lot fabric in general. So if you'll remember back to the public meeting in September, one of my major concerns was the relationship between the growth rate that I would anticipate and it being fairly like between 5 and 10 units per year, and prescribing a lot fabric that was potentially so far into the future that we really couldn't predict what might be needed then. So the compromise is the open blocks and the future residential land, and it really provides the flexibility that gives me comfort in the lot fabric that's proposed and our ability to manage growth over time. So as I said, the open blocks and the lot fabric that is proposed for the single and the semi and the multiple attached were also supported by the peer review of the market research. So I'll just touch briefly on the official plan and give you sort of the general idea of the policy there, and then it's fairly evident why this subdivision can be perceived as in conformity with the North Huron official plan, and that is that the draft plan supports growth that's compact, has elements of active transportation, and promotes the health of the community and respects the natural resources area. So where this gets us is we have these objectives in North Huron to protect natural heritage, provide a variety of housing types, a variety of scale and affordability, and to promote health through the design and through active transportation in the community. So this draft plan achieves those objectives and, in my opinion, is in conformity with the North Huron official plan and with the Huron County official plan for many of the same reasons. So I'll just touch back again on the studies that led us to the area that's suitable for development. And essentially what that means is what area of it can be used for houses. So as I mentioned, there was various studies, including some significant groundwater monitoring efforts and survey work. And most of the time spent over the last year and a half has been reviewing studies and agreeing on parameters and methods that get us to a draft plan that reflects the information that we learned from those studies. So what we end up with is a plan of subdivision that, in my opinion, it respects the natural environment areas that need to be protected. It provides a suitable setback from the top of bank along the river, which is important consideration for the security of people's buildings and the safety of people's persons and property, and identifies areas where some more comprehensive plans and different housing types can be achieved. So there are some areas of the subject land that have a higher water table than you would like to see for development, including basements. Essentially, the engineers of the developer and the engineers representing North Huron agree that the land is still suitable for development, but that consideration will have to be given for the ability to put basements in the whole subdivision and the ability to use other mechanisms to drain water from areas where housing will be developed. So it's an important learning that has come out of the process, and there is agreement, as I said, on sort of review and proposing sides, that it's something that can be overcome through engineering and will be overcome in the final detailed stormwater management plans. I think just to touch finally on lot size again, I talked about a trend towards smaller lots and it being what is more in demand in today's housing market, but also it allows us to achieve, as a township, it allows the achievement of some greater efficiencies, and especially from a servicing point of view and a land utilization point of view. So the draft plan that's proposed and the associated zoning bylaw, they set out the minimum lot dimensions. And although we have a trend towards smaller lot sizes, the zoning will permit larger individual developments. So if somebody wanted to live in the subdivision and just felt that the lot size was too small, there's nothing to prohibit them from acquiring 2 lots and building, the large backyard, the swimming pool, or the double car garage beside the house or detached. So the zoning and the draft plan do work in concert to allow different scales of development throughout the subdivision, but really does address a need for, or a current demand for, smaller sizes. And in mentioning zoning, I wanted to point out that we have had a public meeting with respect to zoning. We had a joint public meeting for the draft plan and the zoning at the same time. I am recommending that North Huron reserve making a decision on the zoning amendment at this time. We're still working out some of the nitty-gritty around zoning, and I think enough time has passed that we need to revisit it in detail before going ahead. And it's also wise to deal with draft plan approval and then zoning. And so zoning suitable to the satisfaction, rather, of the Township of North Huron is one of the prescribed conditions. And I think we've covered the two main concerns at the public meeting, which was the trail and servicing. So the concern about servicing was the costs associated with servicing, and I can attest that the conditions that have been drafted clearly put the cost of servicing infrastructure onto the developer, and that's typical through any type of development. So I'll just finish off with the conditions. I have a set of 31 conditions that have been drafted, and essentially if draft plan approval is achieved, then the developer sets about achieving these conditions. And one of the conditions is a subdivision agreement with the Township of North Huron. So there's a limited amount of time to fulfill your conditions, but that subdivision agreement lasts for as long as it takes to develop the subdivision, and it really speaks to all the detailed planning and the milestones that the developer has to achieve financially and on the ground for the years that it takes to develop the application. So these are prescribed by the approval authority, these conditions. They've been vetted heavily through township and county staff and your engineer of record. And I have shared them with the developer, and they have not, I do have confirmation that there's nothing in here that they object to. So I have, and you have them in your package. So if there's things there that you want to discuss, let me know. I think it's a fairly comprehensive set of conditions, and we did spend quite a bit of time trying to get that right and to make sure that it covered the municipality and the things that you will have to take care of and to be interested in. So just to reiterate, my recommendation is that the Township Council pass a resolution in support of the draft plan of subdivision, and a second resolution in support of the conditions that really are the agreement on how the subdivision unfolds. And I will point out that the applicants represented, Jane McFarland's here from Weston Consulting as well.
I have a question. I know that we've been talking about walkability for quite a long time. And it strikes me that this development is quite a distance from any shopping. And I wonder if there's provision here, if there could be provision in here, let's say for a convenience store or some kind of basic shopping within that area or close to it. Close to it, of course, is a different issue.
Right. So in my pre-consultation with the developer, I noted that the west edge is about 800 meters down to the main street, to Josephine. But once you get down there, do your shopping, you got to walk back uphill. So anyways, it's 800 meters is a fairly reasonable walking distance for accessing services, if you look at some of the literature on that. But to get closer to your question about convenience store or that type of, I mean, this is a residential subdivision, but North Huron's official plan 5-year review that we just completed does provide policy direction for, I believe it's called neighborhood commercial.
Yes, I remember discussing.
Yeah, and so somebody could apply for a zone amendment within the subdivision and to put some type of store or service offering, and it would have support in the official plan to make that change. So it would come down to public consultation and site plan control.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alice.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from council? Dave?
Yeah, when I read through this, I noticed and read that we seem to be aiming our subdivisions to more of a senior population. I wonder if why we would be targeting seniors when we really want growth, and to get growth we need younger people. And so is that kind of a contradiction in the subdivision targeting seniors? Where are the young people going to live?
Right. Well, I imagine Jane has follow-up comments too, but this subdivision doesn't preclude development for families, not at all. In fact, it's really open to any type of residential development. And I've tried at least to focus on flexibility. And at the same time, I can't ignore that there's a significant trend, not just in our area, but in surrounding area and in Ontario in general, for smaller lot sizes. So what we do is we try to provide, like creating smaller lot sizes is harder after the fact than bigger. So what we want to do is make sure that the opportunity is here to accept a lot of development if there's demand for smaller lot sizes. So we can accept those opportunities and builders can work with that kind of a demand and have a lot fabric that will allow them to do that. There is certainly opportunities on these lots to build single-family homes for families, and there's opportunity, like I said, for larger developments if you were to buy a couple of lots. So there's really nothing here that is meant to exclude or to discourage or prohibit any housing type. I think one thing that I can feel really confident about in the subdivision is that there's flexibility for various types of housing, and that was my #1 goal, and I think that the developer has been trying to appease me to that end.
Okay, anything else? Ray?
Sally, in this, okay, the extension of Highland Drive to go across the parcel land in West Turnberry to 86, Highway 86. So that will be all done before, that right away will be all okay before the development?
So how this works, you can see on the phasing plan here. Phase 1 is a group of sub-phases. So A and B would happen first, and I guess if I'll back up a little bit. Phase 1 would be registered first. That means those lots are created. You have holding zones and various things to make sure that the roads are actually built before anyone can actually get onto their lot. And that the developer is providing all the servicing needed to support those lots before they're actually given a building permit. But within the life of the conditions, which I'm proposing is 3 years, each of these phases would, the final plans and engineering would come together, the final, like the fine detail, and each one of these would get registered. So those road allowances would essentially be created within a 3-year period if they were to meet all of these conditions. And then you look to the subdivision agreement for the construction of those as it gets built out. So the very first pieces to be built would be to connect Highland Drive to John, because they're in subphase A and B. And so we wanted to create that loop early on in the process and make sure that traffic could flow through. Phase 3 contains the connection to the commercial lands and out to Highway 86, and that is obviously the last phase that's proposed. So the connection to Highway 86 will be dependent on demand, and it will be dependent on the commercial lands as well. But the road allowance will be created within the 3 years, but whether the road is built is a different matter. Or at what time it's built is a different matter.
Oh, sure. Good evening. I maybe just wanted to touch on some of the comments that you had, Council, and just to step back to the comment with regards to our focus and our aim on retirement versus growth and younger families. And part of the process when we were coming up with the lot sizes, we looked to the experts, the residential market demand, to tell us how the population is aging and where the demand comes from. So it's not very much a focus on the retirement living, but on an aging population, and that's really the bulk of our population pyramids. but at the same time, also recognizing this land and its location, proximity to 2 schools, and the smaller lot sizes, which actually is also focused on younger families with less kids who want to be in close proximity to the schools and the services. And also as well, the comment about the road connections down to Highway 86. We had a traffic impact demand study completed, and they, that those experts told us at what time certain aspects of the road were going to be constructed. But a comment that did come up, well, actually, the subphasing that you do see today was reordered slightly from our original proposal, and we did hear the demand to have that Highland Creek loop completed in the early subphases. So that was incorporated, but also the flexibility or the possibility to proceed with phase 2 should the commercial lands come in before. And that's entirely possible, and we have acknowledged and confirmed with Sally that should there be that demand, that we can definitely look at proceeding with phase 2 and that road construction in there. Pardon? Phase 3. Oh, sorry, phase 3, which would be then our second phase if there's that demand. So just wanted to clear up that point. And I did just want to, as an overall comment on behalf of the developer who sends his regrets he could not be here tonight, did want to just thank staff and council, both staff at township and county level, and the warm, gratitude that we have for everyone's acceptance of this proposal and working with us over the past year and a half to address the comments and come back to you with a proposal that the county and the township really likes. So I'm here to answer more questions should there be any, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. It looks like it was a thorough presentation, so Sally and Jane, thank you very much. If there's nothing else, we'll move on. Or do the motion at this time. Do I have it?
I'll make a
McGowan?
motion to pass the resolution supporting the draft conditions that have been attached as per Sally's report.
Seconder? Reach? All in favor? Carried.
And I'll pass a motion supporting the proposed plan of subdivision and directing the clerk to forward the resolution of the documentation of the County of Huron that's required under section 6 sub 3 as per Sally's report.
Thank you. Seconder? Bernie? All in favor? Carried. Okay, Gary?
Okay, just wanted to revisit the North Huron representative vacancy on the West Ontario Board of Directors. An advertisement was placed in the May 7th and May 14th editions of the New Advance Times seeking applicants for the West Ontario Board position. This will confirm that I received one resume, and that was from Mr. Bart Cameron. I think many of you are familiar with Mr. Cameron and his credentials and his experience. And so I'm looking for a council motion as to whether council chooses to appoint Mr. Cameron as the municipality's representative to West Ontario's Board of Directors. Please note that the annual general meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, June 18th, so it would be ideal to have a new appointee in place for that general meeting.
I would make a motion to appoint Mr. Cameron to the open position.
McGowan and Campbell. All in favor? Carried. Okay, thanks. Thank you for your knowledge. Moving to point 3, CAO clerk.
Okay, thank you, Reeve. Looking for council direction on filling a couple of vacancies we have on our North Huron Economic Development Advisory Committee. Jeff Elliott and Doug Kaibenhoven from the Blythe and Wingham wards, respectively, have resigned from the committee due to work commitments. So we need to fill those two community positions and looking for some direction from council on how to fill those positions. A couple of thoughts is that I know that the county is looking at a new economic development governance model whereby they're proposing to create a new board that would have more business folks rather than elected officials. And so there is the option for council, if you wanted to increase the number of community representatives and have less elected officials, or you can simply look to fill these two vacancies. Just a couple options for your consideration. We could advertise for the positions in the local papers and see what sort of interest we get. Certainly the committee has been active. We'd like to be more active, and it's important that the committee have community representation. I think the councilors that are on the Economic Development Advisory Committee would agree that our committee has worked well because there's both the political perspective as well as the business perspective from the various wards.
Right.
I would strongly suggest advertising for nominations, because I think it would be interesting to see who is keen on giving that kind of leadership, and perhaps it's a way of finding the best resource on the committee. I make that a motion.
Second.
Further discussion? But I think it's possibly a good idea to maybe advertise that it might bring people forward. I think one of the things that really is working is that I'm still in a wait and see over some of the county change of focus. I think there's some really good parts to it. That it's one of these things I think we want to think either of people approach us or think carefully on who we would ask as ones that might have time to think about some of the economic development measures and what they see as things moving forward. Dave?
I'm going to support the motion, but I would also suggest that when we have people that respond to the ad, we don't limit it to just one person from each municipality, and probably two people would bring more to the table.
That I would agree with the number of people that having it, don't restrict ourselves from getting good advice. Money?
So just for clarification, then we've lost 2 members, but we're going to add more members from all 3 wards, then we're just not looking for somebody to replace the 2 missing positions now that East Wawanach has to have. We're looking for all 3 locations.
Sure. That's my understanding.
Okay, that's what I thought.
It's sort of a separate issue, but the county structure is very open and fluid. It's really, I don't think it's really settling into any particular stance. I know there are pressures and there are attitudes, but I think it's still open.
It is very fluid as yet as to what structure. It'll be by, I'll say, the end of the fall. But the thing of it is, it's something that if something better can be brought forward, the opportunity is there with the county level.
So can I just ask for some clarification? So that currently there's 3 members from each ward, so are you talking there's going to be 5 from each ward? Is that what you're adding? Or 1 extra, so you're going to have 4
one
from each
counselor,
ward?
and that what it has been is a representative from Blythe and a representative from Wingham wards.
And East Lawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1.
Just 1 from each ward? Okay, the
No.
report says there's 3 representatives.
It's
1 each
Well,
ward.
it-
That's
it-
why I wanted for clarification.
It
So
was
2.
3 counselors, 1 from each ward,
Okay.
I think is the perceived. Okay. Further discussion? All in favor of the, oh,
I
Brock?
think we should clarify whether we include the Deputy Reeves' suggestion that it could be 2 people. Is that what you're suggesting? I'd be
Or
willing,
up to 2 people.
up to 2 people. I'd be willing to incorporate that in my motion. The seconder approves. Okay.
Okay, are we ready to vote? All those in favor? Carried.
Your worship, could I ask that a note of, or I make a motion that a note of thanks be sent to Mr. Kuyvenhoven and Mr. Elliott for their dedicated service to the Economic Development Committee? I think that's going to be a real loss to the committee.
Okay,
Second.
that's taken under direction. Okay. Economic Development Resources.
Okay, thank you. We're seeking council approval for an additional $17,000 to assist us with some economic development initiatives. We've identified, council and staff have identified several small projects and initiatives that would assist us with marketing and branding and our ability to attract commercial and industrial development. And I've outlined several small projects that do require some additional resources beyond what has been approved in the North Huron budget for economic development. We feel and we're seeing momentum throughout the township, and we feel it's important that we continue to build on this momentum and look for ways to reposition and rebrand North Huron. And we can do that through some of these initiatives, but the other ones, such as appraisals and traffic count studies, will assist us in our ability to attract the commercial and industrial development.
First off, I'll make the comment that this is extremely similar to what I understand St. Huron has done this week too. The same $17,000 towards economic development.
Well, I'm going to try and be a pioneer here, Reed, and kind of set the trend for everybody else to follow.
I'm not discounting any of the points in it, but I just don't want to be doing it as exactly the same as what everybody else is doing. Brock?
Well, I think we've had a lot of discussion on this, and particularly items like the shovel-ready development is such an obvious winner, and like the $6,000 is really, in a sense, a small price to pay for surveys being done, which is just as an indication of some of the things that come out of this. So I think it's money well spent, and it fits in with the developing plans that we.
So I have no problem with the appraisals of the traffic count studies. We have discussed those items several times, and they do need to get done for to move forward on a couple of projects. The radio advertising, I would want to hear more about before we, what's the exact plan, and what are we marketing, and what's the target audience, and what are the achievables before I support that.
Okay. So definitely approval in principle for moving forward, details need to be set. Vernon.
I would take it one step further, and I wouldn't give approval to move forward until we have information, or take the 7,000 out and bring it back another time. I just don't see the benefit of advertising on radios and that for economic development that at this stage. We have one small lot to sell, so we're spending $17,000. I don't really have a problem with the rest of it, but the 7,000, I'd leave it right out. It can come back another day.
Dave.
I have to respectfully disagree with Councilor Bailey. I think that radio advertising, providing we target it in areas outside of North Huron and use other radio stations, I think is important to get people to start thinking. Even if we don't have anything available right now, if we're on the map and if people hear it and they start thinking about North Huron and what there is to offer here, it may be a long-term goal, but it is down the road, and it takes more than one radio ad to convince somebody. If they hear it more and more, then maybe they will start thinking about North Huron and come.
Just to clarify, and I'm saying no until there's more information. We've done a number of different campaigns that have been extremely successful in the past, one of which was a billboard program we partnered with the Blythe Theatre on, which drew an enormous amount of interest up out of the city for the Blythe Festival one season. We had the data and the numbers to prove it. So I think it's a good plan. I think it can be very successful, but we need to know, how to plan before we just go and spend the money to, what are we trying to achieve? What markets do we want to pinpoint? And put the program around that before we just agree. So I'm sure that between Gary and Connie, they'll be able to bring those things back to us.
Okay. Further discussion?
I'd make a motion to approve all the items, save the $7,000.
There's already a motion on the floor.
Is there a motion on the floor?
I don't have them.
No.
Sorry, I thought I made a motion.
Gowan and Bailey?
Minus the 7,000.
All in favor?
What's the motion say first?
My motion is that we would approve all of the expenditures listed in the report, save the amount of $7,000 that was indicated for radio advertising until a report is brought back.
I declare it carried. Okay. Point 3, the source protection municipal implementation fund timeline extension. I think it is only reasonable that we try and identify the timeline with when all the stuff over source protection is approved and in place. That's motion to follow through with the letter of
Yes.
it. Okay, Biden and Callahan. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, Pat, we we haven't done a motion on the one share rent reduction, so,
Yeah, so I was just going to say that you've heard their presentation. The numbers are in the report, talking about what we currently charge as a rate and whether you want to give them a reduction or not at the North Town West Coast Community Complex, and whether we want to extend an invitation to use the Blythe Community Center. I think it's always a challenge to offer recreation programs that are free, because we have expenses, but on the other hand, we do have an aging population, and we do want to offer programs that are accessible in our urban centers, such as Blythe and Wingham, and make them accessible to our residents. It sounds like they're getting excellent numbers. The one program's been running for some time, and we've outlined some conditions with which we could offer the facility at a reduced cost and still making it viable for us to operate the facilities.
I would make a motion to go ahead with the reduced rate.
okay. That's a motion.
Is that for both sites, or simply, so at the rate that they could afford, which she mentioned there, which she had never given me that number before, but I can talk to her for clarity about it. Yeah.
And Brock, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? Brock?
I'd like through you to ask Pat to explain the problem with the large room in Blythe, which would be tying up a huge area, and they would have to vacate it if we had a renter for that facility. Could you explain that?
Right, so we've just started actually using that space up in the hall for evening fitness classes in Blythe, extending our program to the different wards, which was part of our strategic business plan. And so it is a large space, and therefore it can hold a lot more people than they will ever get for a fitness class. Having said that, though, it does work for fitness activities. Because they're being offered a discount, and they recognize this, that should we have, I'll give you an example, the 2 weeks that Threshers uses the facility, they would not be able to access that facility, and they would get advance notice. Those 2 weeks aren't available to them. Similar to if the Barn Dance is set up for the week, or we have another rental up there that would be paying full price or takes priority as a municipal event, then they would be bumped out of the space. And currently at the North Shore West Coast Community Complex, we have other options to move them into, such as a squash court, or talking to the Knights of Columbus, allowing them to use their space or the lounge. The difficulty at the Blythe Community Centers, there's no real secondary space to move them. They would have to find an alternative space or cancel the class.
Right.
Does that answer?
That's good,
Yeah.
thanks.
No problem.
Anything else?
Sorry, I just want to add to that. They're aware of that condition going in there. So it's their choice whether they want to take that space knowing those conditions.
Those in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay. Moving to the Director of Finance, Donna, do you want to take us through? It was a fairly good report, but
Okay. So we're working through the steps required to proceed with the expropriation of the Blythe Lawn Tennis Club property. And so further on in your agenda, bylaw 31, 2014 will be coming up for council to consider. But the other two steps that we're looking at tonight is the first one is the application for approval to expropriate land, and we need council to approve that and actually sign those documents. And the other one is the notice of application for approval to expropriate land, which is the actual notice which appears in the paper for 3 consecutive weeks. Now, with the notice of application, it must be served on the landowners of the property, which, as you know, is our whole crux of the problem, since we have not been able to locate anyone available to act as a signing authority for this particular property. And thank you to Brock, he's helped me do some research. So in lieu of being able to actually serve the property owners, we have to document the necessary steps that we've been taking. So I have done some research in cemetery records and those types of things, and Brock has helped me with some past history of deceased members and such, so that we'll keep all that on file. But however, should there be anyone come forward, it will appear in the newspaper in Blythe for 3 consecutive weeks, outlining that council is giving notice before actually expropriating this land. So at this point, I'm looking for a motion that council approve the application for approval to expropriate land and notice of application be noted as served, since no signing authority for the lawn tennis club can be located. So that would be a motion.
One motion?
Yes, please, that would be fine.
Brock moves, James seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Okay, and may I add the next steps then that we're working on next is we have to have a real estate value and a survey as part of the procedure as well. So we're working through getting those steps taken care of as well, and hopefully we'll keep moving this process along this year. Any questions?
Thank you, Donna.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving to point 6, Director of Public Works, Kelly.
Thanks, Neil. I brought forth my recommendations at the last council meeting, but I wasn't in attendance, so there was a few questions that came up. I'm asking council to authorize a negotiated method for roadside grass cutting, and if there's any questions, I'd like to be able to answer.
Brock, you would want?
I'm very uncomfortable with using the negotiation method. This is a $20,000 a year project. For 3 years, it's $60,000. I think that has to go to tender. I don't think we can, even if we think there's nobody else with the proper equipment or the skill or whatever to do this, I think we have to prove that through the tendering process. I understand why Kelly is making this proposal, but I think given the amount of the contract and the circumstances, I would be opposed to adopting that report.
Steve?
Vincent, last meeting, we tabled the motion. Do we not need a motion to bring it back to the table?
That's correct.
That's right.
I'll make a motion that we bring the grass cutting, roadside grass cutting back to the table.
And Councillor Campbell seconds. All in favor of raising? Carried.
Now, when I say ditto,
If I can?
Yeah.
I understand your concerns, and in the negotiated method, in our purchasing and procurement policy, it does state we can do things differently through this.
oh yes.
And the reason I'm asking is because of our time frame, number one, and our neighbors have used the same contractor for the last 5 years, and the county right now has a number out for a kilometer of grass cutting, roadside grass cutting, and it came in at $184.96 per kilometer. Ours is $219 per kilometer, using the figures that I have, and the contractor's coming in at $174. So there is quite a difference. There is quite a savings for the municipality. I'm looking at not replacing the operator that spent 64.5 days
Right.
last year, or the last 4 consecutive years.
And that's a good move. I approve
Yeah.
of that. That's good.
One of our neighbors tendered 4 years ago, had 2 people put out for the tender. One of them declined after they realized what kind of equipment that they would need and the insurance. And so Morris Turnberry, our other neighbor put out last year, had one person, one company bid on the tender. So that's the reason that I'm putting it out like this.
I just don't accept those reasons as being the valid reason for not using the tendering process. That's my opinion.
Bernie?
Kelly, if I can ask you, Morris Turnberry, what is their agreement with this company? And where my train of thought is right off the bat is, we probably get a better deal if 2 or 3 of us communities went together and tendered it as soon as possible if we have to go.
Well, they've already tendered out, so.
No, I mean down the road. So I'm suggesting that if they've got a 2-year tender with this guy, we should do the
2-year
same.
plus 1 open is
Yeah.
what it is. And that's what the contractors offered us, so.
James?
A lot of contractors don't have the equipment that is required to do this. And I know the tender, the person we're talking about here, and he has the equipment, and I would make a recommendation that we go ahead with this now because of the time frame that we're in.
The one thing, and there's a little more information
Your
in the
worship, I think
report.
Your worship, point of order, your worship, I think Councillor Campbell just made a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Sorry.
That we know what the negotiated is for 2 cuts. We didn't know that at the last meeting. And so that this year especially, there isn't going to be that much cut during May, so that if you can negotiate in June, that would be all the better.
Just a couple questions, Kelly, that came up from the last meeting that I think you and I have spoken about over the last couple of weeks. But one question was if North Huron doesn't do this work in-house, how would that piece of equipment be used elsewhere? I wonder if you could speak to that and some of the maintenance costs for so many hours.
Yeah, the piece of equipment will still be utilized within the township as needed, because we still have some lots that we do cut that wouldn't be part of this contract. And the amount of hours we put on this past winter was 600 hours on the said tractor, and for every 600 hours, the maintenance requirement on it is about $1,500 worth of to keep up. So I mean, there'll be some savings. The tractor will last that much longer. We did purchase the tractor to take on the airport, and they did an excellent job with it this year. So I used a number that of savings, but I think I was very conservative with that number.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion? Carried.
Opposed?
Okay. That Dawn isn't able to be with us. Oh, sorry. Surface treatment report.
Sure.
Briefly
Speak
go
on
over
that,
it.
yeah. So we joint tendered with some neighboring municipalities, and actually the cost came in a little bit lower than what we expected. So our cost to do 1.85 kilometers is the $61,637.59 plus the HST. So my recommendation is that council award that portion pertaining to North Huron 2014 joint tender for supply and application of surface treatment to Cornell Construction Limited. Any questions? Absolutely.
I'll make the motion.
James and Brock? Questions, comments? Ray?
So, Kelly, the money that's going remaining capital money, that would be for question this year.
That's what I've asked
Now,
for. And further authorizes the Director of Public Works to apply the remaining capital money to loose stock maintenance, which is crush, supply, and deliver gravel to the township.
is that in Jim's motion?
Yeah. Anything else? All in favor? Carried. Okay.
I received a note from Don Nicholson. He and his staff are dealing with some issues in Blythe right now with the major lightning strike, so he's not available to attend the council meeting. He's provided his report, and he would like two motions. One motion to accept his report, and another motion to adopt the 2014-2015 operational plan. If there are any questions about the plan, we're certainly comfortable deferring approval until the next council meeting.
Asking for approval of the report first. Reach and Hallahan. Any questions? Yeah. All in favor? Okay. What is your pleasure on the operational plan? Everybody understands it completely?
It's a big read.
Your worship, is it be possible to defer it?
Yes, it would.
There was a lot of attachments, and I'm sure
Yeah.
I'm not the only one that's not entirely all the way through it.
And it's something that
You're through it, I know.
you have to go through certain points of it more than once to completely understand them. So that if council wants to leave that till next meeting, that's entirely possible. Direction put on next meeting's agenda.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving to point 8, Fire Department of North Huron. David.
Well, as I'm starting to feel like a broken record, but our level of activity is, and the report I'm handing out was printed at 4 o'clock, and at 4:30 we had another significant fire call, so the data you're getting is already obsolete. So the 2014 year is, I don't know. In my previous career, when you were really busy, it was a really good thing. As of tonight, we're at 85% of a normal year's fire call hours, and we're at May 20th. And when I say normal year's fire call hours, that's based on the average of the last 4 years. So it's not just a one-year number. FD&H is responding to a call every 36 hours, and that's been going on since January 1st. In the last 48 hours, we've had 4 calls, and what's a challenge for us isn't just the volume of calls, but the severity of the calls is quite notable. We have a lot of large fire calls, a lot of calls involving substantial damage. And while all this is going on, some of our neighboring fire departments are running at about 40% of their normal annual call volume. So when people are asking me how I see the rest of the year playing out, I really don't know. April was a relatively normal, sort of quiet kind of month. As of 4 o'clock before we had our most recent fire call, May was already 20% more than April's payroll for hours and activity. And this is a challenge that plays out on many fronts. Obviously, it's a toll for our firefighters and their families. It's a challenge for us on the budget side. We continue to be very appreciative of the support of our employers. Without the support of our local employers, letting their employees leave to respond to emergencies, our ability to manage emergencies would be severely limited. It's also taking a toll on our equipment. Councillors, you'll see that 2 of our 3 frontline fire pumpers have had to go in for service to Cambridge. We've got a tanker that's leaking oil from the engine. I'll be getting a report on that. We've had a compressor issue with the breathing air compressor at the Wingham station. And routine wear and tear is normal. It happens to equipment. The amount of activity that our fire equipment has been working at in the last 4 and 5 months is just incredible. And the final point I have on my note there is that this all plays out in that the dollar value of structures saved by Fire Department of North Huron activity as of noon today in 2014 is already greater than FD&H's 2014 operating budget. So while we are working hard, our equipment's working hard, and on many fronts we're paying for this, the payback is that we are saving our community structures and valued contents. I'm repeatedly asked, what should we do? What can we do about the call volume? And at our officers meeting last week, we discussed sort of the calls we've been going to. First point is that none of us, and some firefighters have been on for significantly longer than I have, none of us can ever recall, ever, having this continuous volume of large, substantial workload fire calls, ever. The second thing is that we've got all these fire calls coming in, but there is no rhyme nor reason. Take today's call at 4:30 was called in as a typical hydro pole hit with lightning. Well, the lightning hit a tree which ruptured a natural gas line, and we had flames 20 feet in the air from a natural gas fire, as opposed to your routine hydro pole on fire. Through the night, we're out to a manure pile fire, which is always a great way for firefighters to end their long weekend. Is spending 4 hours putting out a manure pile fire. And that's the second manure pile we've had in 4 weeks. And I haven't had one since FD&H was established. There is just no rhyme nor reason to what's going on, but it's just non-stop. And as a fire chief, I'm very appreciative of the support of council. But more than anything, I'm appreciative of our firefighters who continually, even though they're tired, even though their wives are cranky, or their husbands or boyfriends are cranky that they're not home or wanting them home, continually respond and continue to go out and look after the citizens of our area. A few public safety messages we do need to get out, because while they may not affect the number of fire calls, they are important. And that is that if you do have a fire, we would ask you to call 911 or make sure somebody is calling 911 before you try and extinguish it yourself. A fire will double in size every 90 seconds to 2 minutes. And in some cases, while people are trying to put out a fire that may be too big for their fire extinguisher, that fire is growing substantially, and by the time we get called, the fire is well underway. Last year's Fire Prevention Week message was around kitchen fire safety, and it's the #1 area in the home for fires, as the kitchen. We remind people to pay attention when you're cooking meals that you're watching what's going on in your kitchen. And the last one is that spring, and although it keeps raining and raining, it is the time of year when people are burning brush and other things as part of their spring cleanup. And on the June council meetings, we'll be bringing an updated burn bylaw. We'll be proposing one that's in harmony with Morris Turnberry's updated burn bylaw, because there's too much risk to our municipality and to our ratepayers not to address controlled burns in a comprehensive manner. From structures to the quality of waterways, to the liabilities of the municipality by not managing this right. And we'll be looking at a burn bylaw that's clear, concise, but it's also very comprehensive in what you can and cannot do. But if we do all of those last few things, that still wouldn't have reduced a single fire call that we've had this year. And I'm really at a loss. I am genuinely at a loss. We know lots of fire services that are busy. We know lots of fire services that are quiet. But we don't know of anybody that's at 85% of their historical normal call or workload. And our firefighters and myself are at the point where we're really hoping that it does slow down. For all the reasons we mentioned earlier. As for how the rest of the year will play out, I'll be meeting, I need to meet with Donna again when we get some of our invoices in for our recent fire apparatus repairs. And we need to have a look at our budget, have a look where we're going. We have a contingency fund that would allow us for a significant call volume or workload years. But we just need to get a handle on what the rest of our year financially could look like. I can tell you right now that at our current pace, it is not sustainable financially. It is not sustainable for the morale of our firefighters. And quite frankly, as a fire chief, I can't see this carrying on at this rate. And I've said that now for a couple of months to myself. This just can't keep going on. And at some point, it will be our turn to maybe be the 40% of normal call volume. And our firefighters and I think the North Huron Council will actually be quite happy at that moment. So to council, all I can do is assure you that when you call, we're still coming. Our equipment will still be maintained in top working order. We'll continue to train as hard as we have in the past, despite the fire call load. And we sincerely hope that this does settle down. I've had a few people asking me for comments, and I thought I might just address them all to council. For comments or possible concerns on the G2G, Guelph to Goderich, Goderich to Guelph trail in terms of what kind of emergencies that may pose, or risks that may pose, or challenges it would pose for our fire department. As a general comment, FD&H has off-road rescue abilities. We've got our off-road vehicle training ongoing. It'll be ready shortly. Most fire departments, and I put ourselves in that category as well, prefer it when people use properly managed trails or trail systems. And from our perspective, with our equipment, we would be quite happy with a trail system where we know when people are going out hiking or walking or etc., that it's on an organized, safely groomed trail. So the bottom line, I guess, for us is that the emergency services perspective on the G2G for us is a non-issue. We see it, if anything, as a positive. As council is aware, FD&H has arranged a meeting with the Ontario Fire Marshal's marijuana, legal and illegal, in this case legal grow-op expert, so that when we're asked for comments on the opportunity for North Huron to host a legal medicinal marijuana grow-op, we will be going into their heads on as to what it means and what the realities are. And that'll be coming up shortly. 26th of June will be the swearing in of our latest recruit class. That'll take place in Belgrade. And at that time, we're hoping that we can celebrate and acknowledge the contribution not just of the firefighters, but all the people that support the firefighters, from their employers to families. An acknowledgement of the year that we've been having. Also at that time, and it's with regret that I announced that Deputy Chief Keith Hodgkinson has announced his retirement, effective May 31st. Keith has been an invaluable member of FD&H, and we all have to acknowledge his hard work and efforts when Chief Black passed away and touring on as the acting fire chief. Around Christmas time, Keith reached his 25-year milestone as a firefighter, and about a week ago he announced his resignation as of the end of May. And he will be missed, and he's been a great contribution, both as a member of the Wingham and District Fire area, as well as FDNH. It'd be our intention on the 26th of June swearing in to likewise acknowledge Keith's contribution. As well, I provided council with information on personal protective equipment dryers. One of the things that is coming out study after study is the higher than normal cancer rates for both career and volunteer firefighters in Canada and the United States. With that, there's a concerted effort coming forth to do everything you can as a firefighter and as a fire service to reduce or mitigate the risk of cancer. One of those things is that after every working structure fire, the protective equipment a firefighter has been wearing into that burning building will be properly washed and dried before it goes back into service again. For our fire department, having had a fire chief who was 50 and diagnosed with cancer and dying 12 days later, that chief whose two predecessors both have had cancer, the specter of cancer in the fire service is very real. As a fire chief, my assurance to the firefighters was that we do everything possible to ensure their safety. And while a lot of people think of safety as something that's an immediate on-scene moment or a reflection of training, in the case of cancer, safety is something that is a lifelong project, lifelong endeavor. And part of that is that I proposed to council to seek funding for 2 gear dryers. This would allow us, after a working fire, for our firefighters to wash their gear and then put it on a gear drying system with it dried out in a safe and quick manner so that it can be put back into service as quickly as possible. To that end, I sought out several quotes, and you'll see when you look at the quotes, the price range is significant. The final recommendation before council would be to purchase gear dryers from the same company as sells us our fire gear. In other words, the people who are selling us our fire coats would likewise be able to sell us a gear drying system. I have confidence in them as a vendor. I like the fact that the people that sell us the gear are now going to sell us the stuff that looks after maintaining the gear or washing the gear. And they actually have the lowest price. And when you look at the price options, their costing is about half of the highest price equipment. One of the vendors had equipment that I was quite intrigued with, but they would not verify that it met the NFPA standards required for a gear dryer, and I eliminated them from the consideration. So if we're going to do things for the safety of our firefighters, that starts with equipment that meets the standards that will result in that safety. The catch, of course, to this is that in our FD&H budget there was no allocation of funds for a gear drying system. This is not something that in December, in January, February, when we were coming up with the budget, was one of those things that was being readily looked at. In the last 6 weeks, our volunteer fire insurance provider sent out a notice outlining steps to prevent cancer, and one of them was to wash and dry your gear. The Firefighter Cancer Support Network is bombarding the internet, email, social media circuit with all of the stuff firefighters need to do to reduce the risk of cancer. And as such, my request is for funding for this from our Capital Reserve Fund. Our Capital Reserve Fund budget for the aerial was higher than what the cost of the aerial plus the trailer for our off-road rescue unit came in at. So this is funding within that. I'm not a fan of going back with non-budget items a few months into the year. But I've got a hard-working crew of firefighters who are very conscious of cancer. And when I mentioned to them that I was looking at doing this kind of thing, having firefighters say, "We appreciate you looking out for our safety, thank you for going to council," reflects the general concern and general attitude of our firefighters that this bothers them too. John Black was not a very old man, and he went from very healthy to very to deceased in very short order, and that memory sticks with most of our firefighters. So you do have the proposal before you. My apologies for this not being a budget item, but it wasn't something I would have been looking at 6 months ago or even 3 months ago. But now that it's sort of being waved in front of our firefighters is the right thing to do, and the studies are there to back it up, I would ask for your consideration of the proposal.
I'll make that a motion.
Howard seconds. Discussion. Go ahead, Bernie.
David, the contracts we have with communities around us, you're going to give them the same, you're going to have the same conversation with them. We're going to go ahead with this, but just
absolutely.
So that we, okay.
Absolutely. A large chunk of our budget is supported by fire protection agreements with other municipalities, and anytime, be it this or frankly our call volume, may trigger the need to use operating reserve funding. I think we need to provide them the information as to why we're doing it, and why we did what we did. And I would, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's a very good point. We will be doing that.
Thank you.
Further discussion, if any? All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
So, that's it?
The mutual aid bylaw will come later in the agenda here. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, David. James?
Have you given any thought, David, on what we can do to something for our firemen and their wives? I realize they're going through tough times, but just to show them how much we do appreciate them. It's something maybe you want to give thought to and come back to us with, but I think it's maybe time that we do show them and their wives that we do appreciate these guys and work and the efforts that they do.
Thank you for that, Jim. I've actually I've asked other fire chiefs who have gone through extreme years what they've done for their employers and for their firefighter families. So we all, in the fire service, there'll always be times when maybe you've got the extreme year. And I'm going to sort of come back with some different ideas I'd like to put forth for consideration, but thank you for that.
Okay, moving on to new business, point 1. Ontario Good Roads Association, talking about the minimum maintenance standards, and there's a motion requested. Gary?
Just some background on that. The Ontario Good Roads Association created a litigation fund to uphold the minimum maintenance standards at a Superior Court of Justice case. They were successful. There was a lot of money raised from municipalities, and there's about $228,000 remaining in this litigation fund. At the time, Good Roads requested the funds from, or requested contributions from municipalities. They said at that time that if they didn't need all of the money, they would refund it back to member municipalities. So they want to honor that commitment, but at the same time, they're asking council to seriously consider leaving the funds in the litigation fund account for future use. And so that's the motion, that's the direction that we're seeking tonight as to how I'd like to deal with this issue as to whether to take the refund back, which would be around $250, or leave that in the litigation fund for future use by the Ontario Good Roads Association.
Dave?
I'll make a motion that we leave the $250.50 in the reserve fund with the Ontario Good Roads for further litigation.
Seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. And point 2, the Huron County Planning and Development, potential of leasing the former CPR lands from the province of Ontario to allow for its use as a public recreation trail. Gary?
Just to comment that I don't think it's necessary for council to pass any particular motion tonight, although you're welcome to pass any motion resolution that you'd like, but it's not necessary. I wanted to bring this to council attention because I know there's been a lot of questions and issues about the GAG proposal, and David has just spoken to FD&H's issues with it.
Well, basically that, I do have a map here that shows how much of the trail would go through the township of North Huron. It is not, they're using the Greenway Trail, but other than that, it impacts very few of our residents. And I have this from the rail trail circulation list information. If council wants to take a look at it, I can share that with them. I don't know, are there any questions about their intentions? I think with this trail, as we all know, it's to use our Greenway Trail and no different usage than it is right now. Right now, it is a pedestrian trail. It is used by bicyclists, but it's non-motorized. We all know that the motorized vehicles use it, but they're not supposed to. But I'm not sure whether it's really as big of a impactful issue in North Huron as it is for some of our neighboring municipalities.
James?
I believe there's a group coming before the committee of the whole on this very shortly, and I'm not sure when the date is. Maybe you know.
I'm not exactly sure whether it's committee of the whole or whether it'll be a council meeting. At county?
The county.
You're talking county?
I understand it was the committee of the whole that they were coming to, but I don't know.
I can't say for sure.
You don't have a date on it?
I don't have the date on it.
You will let us know.
I know that there's a concerted effort by people to have all adjoining property owners very familiar with the rules, regulations. I know that there's a number of people that have talked about some of the ones, relatives from London that come up to Godridge and drop the four-wheelers off, and whoever's driving the truck and trailer goes over towards Auburn for them to run the full length of the GART trail. Then they load them up and head back to London without purchasing anything in the area. Where if it was pedestrian or bicycles, at least they'd have to buy something to drink or eat or something from the amount of energy it would take. So that it's something that is on the radar. I think there's a lot of points that can favor this, but I will say to a number of the adjoining property owners, and I will say probably even more important in Perth County, is the number of culverts that go under it, that people are questioning the safety of crossing the culverts, because sometimes culverts aren't any longer than what absolutely needs to be there. And there's, between Huron and Perth County, there's still a number of questions to be answered before it goes ahead, I believe. Okay. Council information, 6 points there. And I will, if we get to a motion stage, the correspondence would be included in with a nice thank you letter from Karen Redmond. Points the council would like to bring forward.
A small comment about number 2. Am I in the right section? Council information, right. I'm on the Huron Economic Development Partnership panel, and one of the things that we're finding is that a lot of municipalities and other groups are putting in their proposals, but they don't read the rules. And the chief rule that is hard and fast is that you must pony up 50% of the cost of the project if you're asking for support. Some of them have 10%, some of them have 30%, some have 40.9%, but it's got to be 50%. And other rules there that you pay attention to.
Okay. Any questions on the counts at all? Okay. For number 6, I will be attending. Whether I do much more than go around the course, because it's always best ball. The only way for a person that hardly ever plays golf is that at least somebody in the group will make a good shot. But I will be attending. If anybody else wants to go with me, that would be good.
I don't know about going with you, pretty well set my group up already,
Okay,
but
yeah.
I just want to point out it's awful nice of the board to have to pick Seaforth on Friday afternoon, since I spent Seaforth Friday afternoons all summer. That's my holidays. Can I go back to the accounts?
Okay.
Just ward photography here for $720. I'm just wondering what that's for. It's on page 15.
I couldn't hear that.
Which
Sorry.
department?
Ward Robinson, sorry. I don't know the word. Ward Robinson photography for $720.
Oh, yeah, so he teaches courses for us, digital photography, and I'm trying to remember the name of the other one, but what to do with your photos on your computer once you have them. And so we collect the registration, and then we pay him a portion of that for teaching the course. It's a joint arrangement with our department. So those fees are covered in people's registration fees.
Thank you.
Okay.
Also on page 4, we have the Polygon, and we have computer supplies and a microphone for $1,260. And for particular, the microphone I just caught off, page 4.
Which department?
It doesn't say that.
Gary, do you know, or?
Yeah, you wish it. It's I haven't got my account listing up anymore, but if it's the one with CompuGen, that's the new police scanner that was required, and it has been delivered and is in the midst of being installed. That's the fingerprint scanner.
Thank you.
Gary.
And I believe the microphone is going to be used along with some other new equipment that we're acquiring to update the audio-visual broadcast of the council meetings.
That's good.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, motion to receive, read, and file, Wyden and Campbell. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Through the bylaws.
Yes, please.
Bylaw number 29, 2014, being a bylaw to authorize the reeve and clerk to sign on behalf of council a lease agreement with the Avon-Maitland District School Board. Pleasure, council. Leach and Campbell. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 30, 2014, being a bylaw to authorize the region clerk to execute and affix the corporate seal to a bylaw to assume bridge structures in the county of Huron.
Could we have some clarification?
Gary, do you want to do that, or do you
Sure.
want me?
Just by way of background, this is really, well, I shouldn't say a housekeeping issue, but it's, this boundary bridge involving North Huron and Morris Turnberry was transferred from the county to the two lower tier municipalities back in the fall of 2012. And so county council passed a bylaw to remove the boundary bridge from the county highway system, and really to do it properly, the township should pass a similar bylaw to assume the bridge structure from the county of Huron. And so that's what this bylaw is proposing to do. And then with the passage of this bylaw, this bridge structure would be added to the township of North Huron road system.
50%.
Some more stuff.
It's down the other side of the Legion.
Oh, yeah.
So if I read that properly, then it's going to be a joint venture between Morris Turnberry and North Huron?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Move first, second, and third.
Okay, Biden and Callahan. All in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 31, 2014, being a bylaw to approve the expropriation of certain lands in the township of North Huron, being Block X Plan 173 Blythe, Part Block B Plan 173 Blythe, as in BLY 4149.
First, second, and third.
Campbell and Bodden. All in favor? Carried. Bylaw 32, 2014, being a bylaw to authorize participation in the mutual aid plan and programs for the County of Huron, County of Bruce, County of Perth, and the County of Wellington. McGowan and Campbell. Any discussion? David, do you want to provide a little bit of background?
Certainly, this bylaw reads identical to the bylaw passed in 2009 authorizing FD&H to enter into mutual aid with Bruce County Fire Services. Simply added Perth and Wellington counties to the mix. North Perth being listable, and FD&H are entering into an agreement that we would share aerials back and forth. Should they have a significant structure, we would provide ours. Should we have a significant one, they'd provide theirs. Should theirs be out of service or repairs, we would assist in back and forth. And Wellington County ties in with the fire protection we're now providing to the northeast corner of Morris Turnberry. There are occasions where Minto Fire Service might be called upon for assistance. But in order to do that, we would need to have a mutual aid agreement in place.
Okay, are we ready? All in favor? Carried. Council reports and inquiries. Bernie?
I'd like to say that Brock, myself, and you from North Huron Council were out at the beginning of the farmers market where public input was requested, and it was a good turnout. And they formed a committee, and that's where they stand now. And Both Morris Turnberry and North Huron are involved in it. Both very happy to see it moving forward, and hope to be able to participate in any way we can as a liaison or information. That's up to their committee. You know, we're out of the just.
Thanks. Any other points? Okay, moving forward, the clerk administrator's report.
Okay, thank you, Rita. I wanted to share my time with Connie for your hawkers and peddlers license. A copy of Connie's report has been put on your desks. Could you speak to that?
Sure. So we have just, in examining our hawkers and peddlers license, we wanted to make sure that we were okay with the upcoming festivals, namely Homecoming and the Musical Muskrat Festival. So what we came up with when we met this past week, Gary and Kathy and Donna and myself, and I think there's a few other people because we wanted to make sure we had all ideas at the table. The recommendation would be to charge outside vendors and outside vendors only the $200 for the hawkers and peddlers license for the event in which they are participating in, either the Homecoming or the Musical Muskrat Festival. And as in the recommendation, as both of these committees are committees of council, it is recommended that upon completion of the events, these committees can come and request the money received for licensing to be reimbursed back to the committees. So there's a little bit of an update there, and certainly it works into our strategic plan, since our goal is that our community is attractive to new businesses and residents, and talks about the tourism being an economic development driver. So.
Comments or any questions? You need a motion. If you're in favor of what was mentioned, we would have to have a motion. Dave?
I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation of the Economic Development Officer to charge the outside vendors for Homecoming and Muskrat Festival the $200 fee.
And the second part, or not? That.
Yeah, and recommended that upon completion of the events, the committee requests that the money received for the license be reimbursed to the committee.
You're seconding? Okay. Any questions or discussion? James?
How do you decide whether they're outside, or are we only talking ones in our own municipality?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion? Carried.
If I can, I've got a couple more things. First of all, I just want to say, and I don't know if you've noticed, North Huron's newest business actually opened on the weekend, a Serendipity antique shop owned by Terry Lynn Smith and operated by Terry Lynn and Ken Quiff, opened this weekend. So if you get a chance to stop in, it really does justice to the old Baby Boom and Hannah's men's and boys wear store. It is a store that really, like I say, it belongs in a building like that. And I just came back from a Musical Muskrat Festival meeting, and as you know, they are like about 2 weeks away from their event. So I just wanted to give you these to share with your friends and pass them around. And I think that's it. We've got a really dynamic, as you know, young Muskrat Festival committee this year, and I think we're going to see some really great things from that.
Okay, and Pat asked me to remind everyone that we are welcoming hundreds of guests to the Blythe Campground this week for the Barn Dance Jamboree Camp Out Weekend.
Okay, we'll move forward to public gallery questions and or comments. Please keep the questions or comments to what we have discussed in this agenda. If you have other questions that may have been part of another council meeting, please contact the office during business hours, and staff will try and have those answers dug out for you. But this is meant to deal with the comments and things that we have discussed, things that staff have background notes with them for tonight. Terry?
Go ahead. Sure.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that market we were talking about last Wednesday night. I'm one that's on the steering committee, and numerous of the steering committee wanted a meeting this week, and we were flatly turned down for some reason. I was just wondering why. Just trying to turn this down.
Yeah, well, I think there's more to that, Brad, than you're letting on, but perhaps, Connie, did you want to
Certainly,
share
actually,
anything?
next steps when we left the meeting on Wednesday night was actually that we would contact some people from the Huron Food Network Committee, namely Joan Brady and Janice Dunbar, and as well some of the neighboring farmers markets around, because they've been really, really helpful so far in compiling some information. So as you know, farmers market is a very, very new thing for our community. There's a lot of questions. And you know, first and foremost, how do we fit in with the neighboring communities? What is our pool of vendors? What kind of market do we want to host? Is it a farmer's market? If it's a farmer's market, there are certainly provincial guidelines that we need to fall in line for. So there was a lot of questions. So at the completion of the meeting, by consensus, it was decided that we would first contact Joan and Janice, see if they would give us a date when they could come and talk to the entire committee. And then once we confirmed a date with them, then we would get a little bit of some of the other committees to come. Howick has suggested as soon as we have our next meeting going forward, they would certainly come over and share some of their ideas. So we really wanted to get some of the people at the table who could answer the questions for our next meeting, because there are certainly new field, a lot of unanswered questions. So we need to move forward with the greatest success for this market as possible, and we owe that to the vendors, we owe that to the community, so we certainly want to make sure we're doing things right.
Can I just ask a couple of questions through you to Connie? I wonder if you could enlighten us as to the members of the committee, just so we're aware.
The ones that offered to stand for the committee. If you can remember them offhand.
Oh, sure, I'm going to try. As you know, Pat Campbell has done a lot of the background, and she is the one that has approached both councils about getting this going. So Pat Campbell was certainly there and agreed to take on the chair to get this started. There was Emily Beard that we were all familiar with. There was Archie McKeon. John Freiberger is a possible. Terry Brake, Stephen Hill, Erica Stanton, and Brad Parther, Robert DeForest. I think that might be
most of the ones.
Yeah.
So I just had heard some things that, I wish this committee all the success in the world, and I think it's got a great potential if done properly. I had heard some things that there was some connection with the Women Free Press, and I hope that's not the case, because I truly believe that that's like a cancer on the community. I like the committee. Pat's a wonderful, I've known Pat for a long time. She'll do a great job as the chair, and with the other committee members working for the benefit of the market. Accusations of being turned down for a meeting are obviously not credible, and we need to move ahead in a proper way, and as quickly as possible. We want to get it moving, but we want to do it right. And so, hopefully it will move ahead as quickly as possible. I don't know whether Connie can give us some information with regards to time frames or timelines, what she's thinking.
Well, Well, certainly it's not my call, but I know Pat and Nancy Mickey and myself, we have certainly had some preliminary discussions and meetings with Joan Brady from the, and I'm going to get it wrong again, the Huron Food Network Committee. Joan is in the process right now of opening up the Bayfield Farmers Market. She has also been involved in opening up several more, and she's very connected with the Huron the Sustainable Huron Initiatives for food and agriculture. So certainly she, one of the first things that she mentioned to us when she walked in to meet with us, it was basically, you're looking at 2015, right? There's no way that this can happen any sooner if you're going to do it right. So at this point in time, that's what we're thinking. That was what we thought that was the reasonable timeline we were looking at. At this point in time, Pat has had some conversations with vendors. They're engaged this year. They're otherwise committed. So, I mean, looking at, building a plan for next year and getting those vendors on board for the 2015 season is what we really thought would be a realistic goal.
Bernie?
Brad, I'd just like to answer your comments there. I want to start out by saying that North Huron or Morris Turnberry is not running this show. You have a committee put together, and the staff and the councils of both are willing to help you, but we are not running this, so I'm not sure why you decided to pick on one person. You have other members of, it's up to you as a committee, you guys as a committee, to get together, decide who's doing what, and move forward. I don't think it's going to help if you're... Yeah, and it's not up to, it's not up to our staff to run this for you. It's not a committee of council, and she is willing to help you. We are willing to help you, but that's to the extent of what we're going to do. We do not run it. It's up to you guys as a committee to get together, set your priorities, set your goals, and we'll move forward with you, okay?
So then you're saying I should get the numbers off of Connie and then contact all the members?
This is council.
Mentioned.
It's not
It
meant
was
as a
mentioned.
debate section. It's, you can either make a comment or ask a question. There is not to be any back and forth. Archie?
Your worship, I mean, normal committee structure, the chair calls and organizes the meetings, and I suspect that Pat is working on that for future. So that's the way things normally work. I understand, there may be wishes to get a meeting sooner rather than later, but Pat, I take it that you are working as expeditiously as possible to get the committee rolling, and that's why there's a chair. So.
Okay. Other comments?
Yes, Trevor here. Quick question with regards to the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Has the BIAs been approached? I know they're, I would say, probably as more knowledgeable as to what economic development they would like to see. They're obviously they're a volunteer bunch, and you have to understand where I'm coming from is volunteerism is not on the upswing. It's on the decline. So as much as advertising for volunteer positions is great, you're probably not going to get a lot of people come knocking on the door. Generally, from my knowledge of being a volunteer and trying to set up volunteer groups, it's the person and the contact with those people to say, are you willing to help us, or to give some time? If by advertising you may be just delaying the inevitable of having to ask those people anyways. So that would be my comment to that. One comment I had about this West Area Board of Directors, the time frame in which it took to elect one candidate was astronomical, in my opinion. I'm not 100% sure why it wasn't an advertised position right off the get-go. bantering back and forth between who should be on it, who shouldn't be on it. My opinion, you can have that bantering after it's advertised. And that, to me, is something that more and more councils have to, and I'm not just suggesting just this council, I'm suggesting every council, is that understand the plan and what you want to do to get a person in that position and execute the plan. Don't basically have a discussion on what the plan's going to be when I think everybody in the right mind says, I think we should advertise because it's a public, it's a ratepayer position. So that's just my comment on that. The other comment I have is with regards to budget. I struggle with a budget that was just passed, and I understand some of the economic development resources. I struggle with how these were not a part of a budget for the conversation. Like, I struggle with, like, some of this stuff is not new. So I struggle with how it wasn't in the deliberations of the budget, as opposed to asking for it now. And I understand it's the conversation about reserves, and I get it. But to me, the budget hasn't, the ink's barely dry. And we're now talking about stuff that, if we were going to do, should have been in our initiatives to discuss. So I understand they're important, and everything's important. But that tends to be a bad taste for me, as a ratepayer, to say, here's the initiatives that we have now. Where were these initiatives 5 months ago? From a planning perspective, it's difficult for me to comprehend. So those are my comments.
Okay. Did you want to comment, Brock?
I'd just like to make a comment. I think a budget, yes, it's really, really important, and it's important that we look as far ahead as we possibly can. I think a $17,000 adjustment at this point is not untoward. And the thing is that there are things happening all the time. There are developments that we didn't know about when the budget was being developed. And some of these items are as a result of ongoing planning, and sure, shame on us for not thinking of it earlier, but I don't really think it's causing any problem, really. And in terms of the delay on the Wisterio appointment, again, we haven't spent hours and hours and days mulling over this, and I don't think the time taken has cost anybody anything, hasn't created any problem. And so now that it's being done, that's, to me, no problem.
Okay, on the Wisterio director, just to put things in context, North Huron and Huron-Kinloss are the only two that don't have the head of council as their director. So nobody else advertises. That it's sort of an anomaly to advertise for it. That's why when nobody else was doing it, it maybe took a little longer for us to decide exactly how we wanted to choose the director. The previous director that had represented us had been head of the PUC. Council made the decision of having somebody that knew the system inside out here to be our representative for when joined in with Wisterio. So that's a little bit.
If I may, my comment is that you know that you weren't the head of council. It wasn't the head of council. I understand that.
So that
yep, that's fine.
bordering on
Sure.
discussion there. For a lot that didn't realize that, I believe, of the 11 directors, 9 are automatically heads of council. Gary.
Trevor, I appreciate your comments on the budget and the West Area Plan and the ACTEV Advisory Committee. Just with respect to the budget, I think you can appreciate, and I know you've been actively involved and interested in the budget process and the business planning process in North Carolina. We certainly appreciate interest. And I think as you can appreciate throughout the year, council and staff get various requests. There's strategic planning meetings that take place internally. There's council staff discussions where we identify some other projects and initiatives that maybe need some additional resources, or it could be something completely new. And I guess we could wait a whole year before we bring those things forward. I'm of the opinion that given the challenges facing small rural communities, that if we have the money reserves, which we do, for these projects, that we get council support so that we can undertake those projects and initiatives now and really continue with the repositioning and rebranding of North Huron. And I think it's important that council and staff and the community work together to respond to those things. And as we identify some ideas that we think will make a difference to, as I said, reposition North Huron, to attract investment, attract residents, generate economic activity, I don't think we can afford to wait until next year. I think let's get it done, and let's begin it now. I mean, David's request for the gear dryers, I mean, we're talking about a life and death situation. We could wait a year, or we could do it now. And I think whether it's the gear dryers or economic development projects and initiatives, we can't afford to wait. Let's do it now.
I just want to comment. That's all I'm going to say. My comment is, that's fine. But in the report, there was no comment of the priorities changed. If the priorities change, I'm okay with it. I understand that. But in the report, it doesn't state that your priorities change from the budget. That's where okay.
Noted. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
The Wingham Creek.
Please identify yourself.
Rob Harth.
Okay, thank you.
The Wingham Creek project. Just one comment. She had talked about some undeveloped or some land that couldn't be developed along the riverbank, and that there was a pathway there. I just wonder if council, in meetings going forward, could bring up river stabilization, like the planting of trees and maybe some development to as to that area of the land on that project.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. Okay. If there's no other comments, in camera required. Okay. Motion to go in camera.
Can we hear what the reasons are?
Oh, sorry, it was proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality. Sorry, who the motion?
Hallahan and Hodges. All in favor? Okay, we'll have a short recess.